So just to get started, I want to say, as social scientists committed to understanding the complexities of human societies, it's important to begin by acknowledging the land that which we gather. The University of Toronto operates on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississauga of the Credit. The land has been a site of human activity, governance, knowledge exchange, and cultural expression for thousands of years. It remains home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize the enduring presence and resilience of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. As we engage in scholarly inquiry, let us reflect on the responsibilities we carry as researchers, educators, and community members to respect Indigenous knowledge systems, histories, and rights.
Welcome everyone to the Reframing Pain Conference. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to have this day finally arrive. At this particular historical moment, I think it's more important than ever for us to gather together in the work that we do toward equity, toward social justice, and be able to support each other. So PEPR is the project from which CASPR emanates. So PEPR has two main objectives. The first is to bring an equity lens into this notion of patient engagement in research and to really explore both what that does look like and what it could look like. And then the second objective, which relates directly to CASPR, is that we have a mission to advance critical social science approaches in the chronic pain and pain research spaces. We are inter and multidisciplinary. We have anthropology, we have sociology, we have nursing, philosophy, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, psychology, social work. You name it, the disciplines I think are represented through CASPR. So thank you so much everyone for being here, and thank you to all the speakers who've traveled so far to join us today. So Joan, can you tell us a little bit about the origins of CQ? And describe why you chose to do or feature critical research.
Before I start answering your question, I just like to say that I'm retired. That's what Professor Emerita tends to mean. But if I weren't retired, I would probably be signing up for CASPR, because actually quite a lot of my work, I realized, I worked with injured workers and disability, work-related disability, and it was all about pain. So I might have been in this room had I not been retired. But in any case, okay, back to your question about the origins of CQ, which is the nickname for the Center for Critical Qualitative Health Research. It actually started in the last century, believe it or not, in the 90s. And it was all about me, because I was at the University of Toronto. I was a social scientist in the Faculty of Medicine originally. It became its own Faculty of Public Health afterwards, but I was originally in the Faculty of Medicine. And I was in the minority. I mean, minority. Nobody knew what on earth qualitative research was, and it was quite kind of lonely, and I got tired of explaining to people all the time where I was coming from. And so I really just sought out like-minded folk around the University of Toronto, and just began to pull them together, and just to feel better, really, and be able to talk to somebody that knew what you're talking about. So that was stage one, really. It was kind of community startup. But stage two was in the late 90s. A colleague of mine, Denise Gestaldo, who was in the Faculty of Nursing. By this time, I was in the Faculty of Public Health Sciences. It merged many times. And we realized that we had these doctoral students that we were trying to supervise, and they had no access to advanced level qualitative research methods. And there weren't any around the university, really. Maybe something in sociology or whatever, but certainly not in the health sciences. And so we basically established a couple of courses we teach, and for our own students, really, at first. And then gradually more and more people from around the health sciences began to sign up for them, and they kind of became more settled and more kind of operative. We ended up, developing a curriculum around qualitative methodology. So education building was stage 2. And stage 3 was institutionalization. In 2009, it became CQ. It basically just carried on with everything they'd already been doing, because we did lots and lots of stuff. We had visiting scholars, and we, wrote papers together, and we just did lots of stuff. But it was all informal, and with no controls over it. Anything that we wanted to do, we just did. We didn't ask for permission. We thought forgiveness was easier to ask for than permission at the University of Toronto. So we just did it, but it eventually became necessary to institutionalize. But institutionalization, of course, comes at a cost. You lose some of that freedom, some of that, you definitely lose something. But it became necessary for us to keep moving, to assert some visibility, to somehow manage the demand, which was enormous for qualitative research in the health sciences. So we became a center, but it was still a cluster of faculty from a whole number of different faculties, departments, and also research institutes outside of our faculty. So we wanted to differentiate ourselves from mainstream qualitative research. It wasn't just establishing qualitative research in a field that was dominated by more positive, with a randomized clinical trial for a start. It was about trying to differentiate ourselves from what we felt was rather inadequate qualitative research that didn't go very much beyond kind of quasi-positivist theme hunting. And we wanted to develop the more cutting edge, the more advanced level of methodology in qualitative research. And this, we figured, was the way to do it. So that led to stage 4, which actually coincided with institutionalization. Was then you notice that the word critical is in the title, the Center for Critical Qualitative Health Research. It was a bit of a struggle to keep it in there. We weren't even in a post-Trump era, or in an anti-expertise era, but even at that time, critical, people sniffed quite a lot about the word critical, and it had its challenges, but we felt it differentiated us from basically the kind of mainstream research flow that we wanted to change. So that's how critical got in there. And our definition of critical, which I have no idea what you operate with, but our definition, our functional use of critical was that it was something that was capable of questioning the core assumptions of a discipline or a field, first, and then secondly, that it accommodated and actually spoke to the role of power in what we were studying, in what we were trying to understand. And third, we had a commitment to equity and fairness issues as well. So there were challenges, not just in the broader world of having critical attached to our center, but we were sometimes accused of being elitist and exclusionary. We were excluding every Tom, Dick, and Harry who thought they could do qualitative research. If you just do a few interviews and write them up, you're doing qualitative research. So there was a certain discomfort about us establishing a center at the cutting edge, but that's a whole other set of story. And also, one of the reasons for it was that we had to fend off. There was only a few of us, really, certainly a few of us that were core faculty, and then the rest were all network folk around and about. There were few of us who were actually teaching. And we were constantly approached to do introductory qualitative research. Nobody ever approached us to do anything other than that. It was just introduction in an hour or two, I don't know, X group or Y group, or the surgeons want to know about, how to do qualitative research. Could you tell them, please? And so we wanted to fend off a limitless demand to operate at that introductory level. And because of that, of course, people saw us as being a little snotty, which we probably were. But anyway, so that's my answer to your question 1.
So, how we got about to starting scene is that I had the very good fortune of getting to work with Professor now Emeritus Elaine Denny, who was one of the first sociologists to explore women's experiences of endometriosis and a well-known, renowned sociologist of pain research. And unlike Joan, we can't drag her out of retirement, so she wouldn't come today. So you get me. But my interest in endometriosis, or endo for short, comes not from having endometriosis myself, but as a feminist, and the anger and productive rage I have towards the medical misogyny and racism that leaves women, especially those from minoritized communities, in pain. But getting back to how we started seeing is Elaine and I had done a study on women's experiences of endo treatment, and we found that the narratives of dismissal, of being made to feel hysterical, hadn't changed since the research she had done some 20 years prior. And then we were seeing this growing amount of non-critical qualitative research on endometriosis, just huge amounts coming out, replicating and saying the same things over and over, but really not progressing and challenging what's already known. And so it was this inertia around endometriosis, and this growing number of non-critical qualitative studies that spurred the creation of SEEN. And so in 2020, with no funding, but with Elaine's blessing, I put a call out for an expression of interest to join SEEN with the aim of addressing the silos in the field and platforming social, critical, and qualitative research. And we're a little bit less discerning. That's probably the hand basers that I, and I can't believe I said that way. This is being recorded, but but seeing members, they do range. They range from more radical approaches. We have amazing CRIP activists and researchers who run the Endoviolence Collective, to sociologists and anthropologists, to the more what I call the qualitiest of the qual psychology health researchers that are often welcome in rooms that we're not always welcomed into. But our website lists all of our main aims, et cetera, et cetera. But why people responded so much to wanting to join SEEN that we were hearing from academics is this desire for a community, and what you're saying, just a place to feel good, not to feel misunderstood. What we were hearing today of a lot of us are either in WIMS and in medical research context and we're the oddballs out, or we're in social science context and they don't understand the kind of health research that we do. So making a space for ourselves was how this came about and what motivates people. And I just wanted to list what we've been able to do in these 5 years by coming together. We had an international conference funded by the British Academy called Reframing Endometriosis. We have a postgraduate group, the Advised Government Inquiries, and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Endometriosis in the UK. Our network is recognized now by the World Endometriosis Society, which is our equivalent of the IASP. And the World Endo Society created a special social science early career ambassador. And they're also working to improve engagement with social scientists at the Congress. And most recently and most excitingly for us is SEEN and its members were asked to, by the World Endometriosis Research Foundation, to identify endometriosis social science research priorities, which are going to be included alongside the clinical and patient identified priorities. None of these things would have been possible had we not organized and come together.
That's amazing. And I want to circle back, but not right now, but maybe near the end to talk about the rage you mentioned, Annalise, and what we do with that, because there's not much of a space for it, especially when we're trying to communicate in clinical context. So I'm going to circle back to that. But for now, I wanted to ask you both, and I'll go in the same order. I'm going to ask you first, Joan. Why do we need critical research in general and at this particular moment?
Critical approaches are an avenue or to new thinking. It's a pathway, in my view, to creative science. It makes it it enables the questioning of core knowledge of a discipline and a field. And by acknowledging the role of power, it brings something that is often not under consideration. Power is often just ignored or just not treat it as something that's operative or nobody knows quite how to deal with it. And so in general, I think critical is a really, really important way for innovation and creativity and new thinking. So that's what it is. Certainly is for me, because knowledge is not neutral. Knowledge frames what is asked and what answers are looked for. And so from a critical perspective, it frames things in a very different way and asks different kinds of questions of it. And that's, I think, that a big value of a critical perspective. Certainly the way I define critical. Also, at a particular moment, like now, not just in general, it can be very difficult to question at any time, actually, scientific truths and show that they're epistemological and ontological. That was really hard to do in the health sciences. There's the scientific method, by and large, and the kind of approaches that we were taking were not considered to be, proper ways of doing science. But we didn't let go of the notion of science. We wanted to hang on to, Larry, claim the idea that we were science. It was always difficult to argue in the health sciences that you can approach research from different epistemological standpoint, but many people in the health sciences don't know there is only one way of being a scientist and thinking scientifically. So it was always very hard to argue. But in the post-truth era, it is particularly challenging and presents, I think, some really important challenges to anyone who claims to be doing critical research. In a way, it's needed more than ever. It's needed now at this moment to push back against the anarchy of an anti-scientist world that we're in. And, there's the worry that the critical is going to be dumped out with the woke baby. Critical sounds an awful lot like woke. And certainly, I don't know, but in Europe, I know many of you are from Europe, it's perhaps not felt as acutely as it is in Canada. The threat of anti-science and anything with the word critical in it is a hazardous place to be in North America. Critical race studies and all that. You go down with that ship, with the critical ship. So that's a bit of a worry at this particular moment. But at the same time as that's a worry, I honestly think that the critical is the only way to approach the notion of truth and to recover some semblance of sanity in thinking about what is the truth. I mean, critical qualitative research was always an interpretive science. It always maintains that there are many truths. There isn't just one story to be told about a problem. But then, of course, in an era where any truth goes, that's a precarious place to be standing. So I think some work has to be put into not abandoning. I'm not suggesting for a moment abandoning it, because I think I would hope it would be the thing you can hang on to in confronting some of the new scientific vibes that we're in the midst of. So I also think that the critical, certainly for CQ, one big value it was an important rallying point for researchers who are from very different substantive areas. In CASPR, you all, I think, are all about pain in one way or another. You're coming from different directions. Many of you are social scientists, I think, whereas in CQ, we're scattered all over the place. Some people are in aging, some people are in disability, some people are in nursing, some people are in medicine, some people are whatever. They're all over the place. So what is your rallying thing? And I'm going to talk to that more with one of the other questions, but critical is one of the key things that bind us. It's a kind of perspective on whatever it is we're looking at.
Great. I'm going to go instead of just saying why we need critical research in general. We all here know in this room why we need it. So I'm going to go straight into why at this particular moment and really echoing Joan. We need it in this particular moment because it's part and parcel of the resistance against current attacks on academic freedom. And full disclosure, I was born in the United States. And so I came to Canada to get to the University of Toronto, then York, and then fled over to Warwick. But I was born in the U.S., so feel a special responsibility to address the ramifications of this second Trump presidency that we've ushered in. And these attacks that we're experiencing right now are a backlash to the very progress that we've made so far in critical and progressive movements generally. And academic institutions, I've heard said, because I forgot the person who said it, sorry, but academic institutions are slight angles to society. They don't indoctrinate any more than do they serve as exact mirrors to society. They're supposed to be spaces for critique, for examination of society and of ourselves. And so engaging in critical pain research is part and parcel of this project. And there was another part of the question of what is it about networks and communities that can help us move forward. So turning to our networks and communities and how they'll move us forward, they can act as a space for respite and coming together and to get us through these hostile times, but they can also help us organize. And I just want to provide one example of how they can help us organize. So with SEEN, we're allies with the Feminist Academics Network, and now, so hopefully with the British Medical Association, who have both responded to the recent UK Supreme Court ruling on the legal definition of what it is to be a woman, because we can legally define that now. We can decide, yeah. So with the judge's ruling that sex is binary, and the legal definition of what it is to be a woman is solely based on biological sex. And both the British Medical Association and Feminist Academic Network, as well as many others, have called out this definition for not only having absolutely no scientific or medical basis, but the real danger it poses to trans, non-binary, and intersex patients and communities. And why this is important to the work of SEEN is that people with endo are fighting to have endometriosis recognized as a whole body condition, to be seen as whole people rather than as pelvises. We have a problem. And medically, the latest definition of endometriosis is that it's a whole body, likely inflammatory condition, and the notion that it's solely a gynecological or menstrual condition is outdated. There are gynecological and menstrual symptoms, but it's not a gynecological condition. And recognizing this is crucial, first, to improving diagnosis and treatment, because not all endo symptoms are in the pelvis or menstrual. Second, it helps promote more inclusive care for trans and non-binary patients. And third, it helps us move away from the historic and ongoing focus and prioritization of fertility over pain in endometriosis patients. Still, like a recent study showed, nearly half of all patients report being advised at some point by a health professional to have a baby to treat their endo. And this is a myth, a complete myth, rooted in the eugenic history of endometriosis. So this is why the Supreme Court ruling is so troubling, as it further reinforces this notion that women are defined by their biology and their reproductive capacity. So this is just one example that I wanted to show that we can come together as communities to act together. And if anybody wants that to sign the Feminist Academic Network statement called Not in Our Name, non-UK academics are very welcome to sign as well.
So, Joan, that question to you as well. What is it about networks and communities that helps move us forward?
Well, networks and communities. The first reason I think for networks and communities like this one and the ones we're talking about is for strength and for support, particularly for marginal groups. Now, our CQ is a marginal group, all right. We still are, and we actually want to stay actually at the margins. But we are a marginal group, and because qualitative methodology violated dominant scientific norms in the environment in which we were operating. So the network and the community was hugely important in feeling able to stand up and feel confident in what you were doing. It was also validation. You mentioned the word legitimacy or validation. It's a kind of validation. It affords visibility and legitimation to those who are operating at the margins. So it's particularly important at the margins. That's the first reason, political. The second reason is scientific energy. I think it's having community, having networks of people that are kind of in the same field, same playing field as yourself, is very exciting. It provides new insight, new perspective, new ideas. It's very stimulating networks and communities. So it's invaluable from that point of view. And I also think community is important because it's a key source of internal critique. It's hard to take critique constantly from those that are on the outside, that don't understand you or don't get you, and you're constantly trying to explain yourself in a hopeless way because you can never explain it in a sentence or two to someone who's sort of putting you down. But you can take it from colleagues in a very different way, and internal critique is really important because critical perspectives and whatever perspectives we've got all need, the critical has to be put on ourselves as well as on our subject matters and on things out there. But it's a lot easier to engage in self-critique and when it's in a community and in a group. So that's the second. So scientific energy, self-critique, and the political dimension is what I would add to what Annalise said.
Okay, so thank you both for those answers. And I can relate to everything you've both said so much, and I'm sure many of you in this room can as well. So, Annalise, I'm going to go with you next because Joan just answered. So, what are the top 1 to 3 strategies that worked for your own communities? Because we're really trying, I think, to find a way forward. We've been together since 2023 in various forums. This is our first time meeting in person, and we only have a number of the full group here with us, mainly for reasons of cost constraint. So, yeah.
So I'm going to first just talk about just generally foreseeing some of the work that's inspired us for just our general approach to doing this work. And one of them that's been working for us, and people said it repeatedly, is getting comfortable with the discomfort and productive tensions that come with building community across sometimes uncommon bedfellows. So that's one thing that's really helped. The other thing is looking to the work of Sarah Schulman, who wrote The Fantasy and Necessity of Solidarity. I love that title. The Fantasy of Solidarity, the Necessity of Solidarity. And she argues solidarity is doable when we strip away notions of heroism. So like these individual acts that we're going to be the ones that move things forward. Perfectionism, that's my downfall. I have to remember that doing the work of seeing imperfectly is doing it then better than not doing it all. And also looking for pure motive. Sometimes we do have to make some uncomfortable alliances to move things forward, I found. We could talk more about that. I'm also Catholic, so I feel a lot of guilt about that. But if we try to have all of these three things, heroism, perfectionism, and pure motive, then it's unachievable, and it's even hard to start trying to create solidarity or community. And the point of solidarity itself doesn't create the solutions. It creates the infrastructure to address social injustice issues. and this work, it takes time, and that you have to be patient and you have to be persistent, because we're all tired and overworked, and many of our scene members are academics with a chronic condition, with endometriosis, so sometimes things move more slowly. And then with the burnt out, my university was on strike yesterday because we're burnt out, and now I'm on work to rule, so we're operating in this system and have to figure out how can we still find those bits of energy to keep going. And then the other two things were far more practical for like the top things that CASPR can do. We all know how energized we feel from being in this room, for feeling like, or I'm not the only one doing this work. And yes, we can all come up with a lot of ideas of what CASPR can do, but we all need to commit to helping that work get done. Either it's we do a book and we say we'll help edit. Maybe it's in our next bit of funding, we try to find a bit of money for CASPR. There are a lot of academics here from the UK. Maybe we have a CASPR UK network, and we really start trying to work out to the European IASP, who I've heard through the grapevine might be more amenable to the kind of work that we do. And oh, I had a third one, but these are my notes, so that's quite hard. And then I think it's trying to shift your notions of success. Is success that we get a entire panel at the IASP? Is that what that we finally get some acceptance? Is that it? Maybe it is, and partly, but there's other things that we can be doing too. We've had a lot of progress. We've demanding that our funding bodies recognize in health research more critical approaches. And Horizon, the main European funder for health research, now all applications have to have a social science element embedded, and tokenized approaches to social sciences don't win the bids. That's really helped because now the biomedical researchers are coming to us rather than us trying to push ourselves in.
So I've been working to have CASPR, which is international. So we're a third North American. I'll put Canada and the US together for a moment. A third from Europe, and a third from sort of other countries. So do I have that right, Laura? More or less. Um, uh, so we've been trying to get CASPR recognized at the ISP for about 2.5 years, and I'm getting absolutely nowhere with it. I just keep being asked to fill out the same form, and it goes somewhere around and comes back to me, and I have to fill it out again. So anyway, but I'd love to talk to you more about that. But I really wanted to pick up on what you called uncomfortable alliances. What can you say more about what you're referring to there?
I'm being recorded. Hey, what? Okay, uncomfortable alliances. So like Joan said, that you're getting asked to come and do these rather rudimentary introduction to qualitative research seminars per surgeons. Well, that was one of the ways that we could get into the World Endometriosis Congress. We offered, yeah, we'll do that. Yes, we'll do that. But then we want a entire panel, and we want to decide the speakers for that panel. And then also through that, we were able to leverage that for the endometriosis research priority setting that's going to be taking place at the upcoming Congress. They often just think that patient priorities are one and the same with the social science priorities. And so we said, no, we need our own separate one. So that's what I'm talking about, of kind of some uncomfortable alliances. Uncomfortable alliances sometimes yeah, I'm gonna say it, like within scene, we do have some gender critical folks that it came out in the reframing endometriosis conference of who wanted to put she, her, and who didn't want to put their pronouns, right? We kind of saw it there. And we at Scene take a very firm stance where you say people with endometriosis, we take a stance. But we still try to make spaces to have these conversations too. I'm not going to ban somebody who's gender critical completely from Scene yet. We might see down the line. I think that will change. I think of being kind of naive that we can have these open conversations. But I think in the UK, the gender critical movement is much larger. And also I'm in a nursing and midwifery unit, and that there's a strong element of, we're not recording this, so of turf, notions of turf or now gets nicely called gender critical. But I still like the acronym Feminist Appropriating Reactionary Transphobes. So you know what that, yeah, fart. I had to say it. I thought I would be the first person to swear here, and all I'm going to do is say the word fart. But feminist appropriating reactionary transphobes is far better than TERFs. So I don't think that we're in alliance with that group, but we don't ban them from coming in completely. And they do tend to be quiet. But like for the Reframing Endometriosis conference, we had a trans activist with endometriosis, and we couldn't reveal his name prior, because we could have had protests outside of the door. So only once he came in could we reveal his name, and then he could speak.
Can I just make a
Yes.
comment
Yeah.
on her, not my blurb, but I love that uncomfortable alliances. That is such an important issue, because all the way along in developing any kind of a community, you can't just push everyone away and be what you want to be. You have to give in, negotiate, ally with various people at various times, sometimes at great risk. Um, an example of a risk in our particular domain is mixed methods, where, I mean, everybody talks mixed methods, and why don't we just join the mixed methods crowd, and you can do the qualitative, and everyone else will do the important stuff, and of course we would argue that to quite a large extent, mixed methods has attempted to actually colonize the qualitative in our field, and so that we try to reach out and work with other groups, because that's what's expected and that's what really you sort of have to do. But at the same time, you have to be really careful, because before you know it, you've been taken over and whatever. Anyway, that was just a comment. I love the alliances part is really important. It's political. So do you want me to add a bit okay. So my top 3 strategies that worked for CQ, recognizing that CQ is definitely different from you. It is, but you'll take what is relevant to CQ and transform it into something that makes sense for you. But I've already mentioned that the context of CQ is that the academics and the researchers come from all sorts of different places, different institutions, different disciplines. We have most of them are local, some of them are national, and a few are international. We're not as international as you. But nonetheless, we're working with a real mixed crowd, pharmacy, social work, and some of them are more amenable to, collaborating with. There's rehab, clinical medicine, public health, pharmacy, all these kinds of places people are coming from. And so how do you bring them together with a common purpose? And I've already mentioned the critical was one avenue. So finding the common ground was a really important focus that emerged over the years. It's important to look for the sweet spots for shared interests. For us, it was, first of all, methodology, because regardless of your substantive area, the methodology, we have an interest in common in methodology. The second was social theory. Most of us had some kind of social science background, but in the health research field, there's an astonishing number of people who come in with zero social science at all, and yet the essence of certainly critical qualitative interpretive research is social theory. I mean, it's part of the methodology. It's really hard to do without social theory. So social theory was one of the ways that we pulled all these different disparate substantive areas together. And the third one was criticality, which I've already mentioned. And so we engaged in various activities around those common sites of interest. Our seminars were always on common areas, not on somebody reporting their research findings. It was always at the level of methodology or theory or whatever, that everyone could take something from into their own areas. And we spent a lot of time doing writing papers and preparing sort of policy documents for academic promotion of trying to promote the academic lives of people doing this kind of research, because that's, of course, an additional problem. If they fall out of the academy, then there's not much of a community left, you know. So we devoted energies to helping each other maintain and succeed in our careers despite marginal status, marginal methodology. Another of the second strategy was that we pivoted everything around education. It was we all had educational objectives in common, regardless of what discipline or professional background we came from, and it provided enormous personal and group intellectual stimulation. I didn't know anything about methodology until I began to teach it. I really didn't. I was surprised how little I knew. And when you start to teach this stuff, you really get into your own research. It really fueled one's own research. So education had big value that way, apart from being a common shared interest. And also, it was a reach out to, it was a community outreach, because we were producing people that were like ourselves. I mean, we were reproducing people that thought a bit like ourselves. And they're out there. They're now in other universities. The community just grows by virtue of producing the next generation of scholars. And that was really important, that common effort, and then seeing the community just organically grow because you're producing people that are capable. Men can't practice critical research at first. When you get your first job and you haven't got tenure yet and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to do critical research. But you wait until the ground is right, and you can do it at a certain point. So we focus on trying to support people in different kind of contexts. People in research institutes often find it really hard to do critical research because you're being critical of the institute's policies, or you're being critical of what the institute is meant to be doing. So the practice of critical research is quite difficult in settings that aren't as protected as academic ones are. We may think we're beleaguered at the moment, which we are, but boy, it's not as beleaguered as being out there in the world trying to do critical research. That really the teaching part had a lot to give. Even though in research-intensive universities, certainly like the University of Toronto, the emphasis is entirely on research, and you have to make it in the research world, and the education is kind of secondary. And so we had to struggle to keep education really close at hand because it was so closely tied to our ability to do research.